Hello comrades, welcome to the Revolution Report. Welcome to our live stream today. It's December 3rd, just 10:30 exactly on the dot here in Moscow. Going to give people a few minutes to come into this live stream today, because I know I gave pretty much pretty short notice for this, and I'm not sure how many people saw it, but we've got a couple viewers watching right now. Hello guys. We're going to be talking about the railway, or proposed rather, railway strike that has been in the news lately in the United States. The four major railway unions that have been talking about potentially striking as a result of not having enough paid sick leave, which is not that big of a demand, to be honest. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Communist Party USA's, or at least the leadership of it, its reaction to this, and how it follows a trend, really. It follows a trend of basically collaborating with the Democratic Party on pretty much any issue and thinking that it's progressive. We're going to talk a bit about that. Hello, everyone. Hello, Ukrainian Socialist. Telltale Wrecker. I like your name. That reminds me of there's one of our fans on our Instagram that usually likes our stuff. His screen name is Leftist Infighter. So people come up with really creative names here. Hello, Yankees. Comrade Rose of CPUSA sold out. I'm glad I stopped messing with them. I mean, they sold out a long time ago, to be honest. But as I'm going to talk about in this live stream, you know, there's a lot of good people in the CPUSA. What I'm going to be talking about today is basically the party line, the decision of the leadership, or the multiple decisions of the leadership in terms of what political lines they've taken on a number of key issues. But, you know, a lot of people actually in CPUSA are pretty upset about that. And the leadership isn't exactly popular with the entire rank and file. So, yeah, you mean with this specifically? Yeah, well, we'll talk about it because it's a bit wishy-washy. Obviously, the CPUSA, it looks like they try to kind of play every angle, to look as leftist and peace-loving as possible, but the result, as we're gonna see, is just kind of some ultra-leftist position that just can't be rectified with reality, with the material reality of what's going on. But anyway, I'm gonna get started here because we've got just about 20 people watching now, so some people have started to come in. And for those who just started watching, just to give you an overview of what I've been talking about, we're gonna be talking about the issue with the rail workers strike in the United States and the reaction of specifically the CPUSA's leadership on that, and how it just kind of follows a trend that the CPUSA leadership has actually had for quite a while on some key issues. The main one I'm going to connect it to is the Russian special military operation, and we're going to explore kind of the essence of the political essence of these stances that the CPUSA's leadership tends to take, and what it reflects, really, because in my opinion it reflects a misunderstanding of a lot of things, a failure to look deep into the matters in which these political lines are being made. But anyway, let's get this show on the road. For all of you watching right now, if any of you don't know really the specifics of what's been going on with this potential railway worker strike that was talked about, it was expected to happen for a while on December 9th. The latest thing that's happened with this is basically that Biden signed a decree that makes any potential railway strike illegal, and it basically forces a contract on these rail workers that was completely unpopular, that none of these rail workers wanted to take. So this all started really with, one sec, I'm just gonna delete some nonsense in the chat here. Just some spam connected to porn or something. Anyway, getting back to the matter of things. I should really have a moderator in the chat. I'll bring one on next time. But anyway, there are 4 railway unions that were considering a strike action, and they represent the majority of railway workers in the United States. The reason why they wanted to potentially bring it to this point is because they were getting nowhere in negotiating with the bosses, and their major demand, their original demand that they wanted, the most controversial demand that they originally wanted was 14 days of paid sick leave a year, which to me is like, it should be a human right, at least 2 weeks of paid sick leave. Like, what if you get really ill? And what, are you going to lose your job? It's unbelievable. But that was the original demand. And then it went down to 7 days paid sick leave. That was the demand. And then Biden signed the contract that Biden signed to impose upon the workers now gives them a ridiculous one paid sick leave a year, extra 1 paid sick leave a year. So if railway workers have to go to the doctor to get some sort of checkup, they need to use their own days for that. They need to use their personal days for that. Now, just to give you an idea of the system that's in Russia, for example, and we're talking about the United States is the richest country in the world. To give you an example of what it's like in Russia, there's a thing called больничный list, which is like sick list. If you get sick, you can go to the doctor, and the doctor will, and this is allowed for all workers in Russia, the doctor will basically officially register you on this sick list, and your job needs to let you go and pay you a fraction of your salary. And you have to have checkups with the doctor, and the doctor ends the sick leave when the doctor determines you're better. There's no like set amount of days you have that you're allowed to get sick in the year, as it is in the United States, and this like apocalyptic capitalist situation in the core of the empire. So we're talking about this contract giving them 1 extra paid sick leave day a year. Okay. So obviously, the unions were not happy about this at all. I saw someone in the chat say that they should strike regardless of legality. If I was a railway worker in that situation, I would totally call for that, because the reason is exactly the same reason why they should strike, even if it's illegal, is the same reason why Biden forced this contract on the workers, because Biden said that it would basically collapse the U.S. economy. He said that every day there would be a railway strike in the United States, it would cost the U.S. economy $2 billion a day. So every day there's a railway strike, $2 billion a day would be lost to the U.S. economy. It would completely paralyze transport in the United States, because these 4 unions, like I said earlier, represent the majority of railway workers in the U.S. And that's exactly more reason why these people should be given what they're asking for, which is not much at all, as I already established. I mean, the workers in these railway unions, without them, the economy can't function. So instead, the reaction, of course, from the capitalist state is to impose a contract on them, the parameters of which are dictated by the bosses, of course, and this is classical Marxism. The capitalist state represents the interests of the capitalist. So in a time of crisis or disagreement, of course, they're going to, reinforce the interests of the capitalist class. So that's understandable in the United States, especially in the imperialist center, where, these laws are draconian when it comes to workers' rights. It's unbelievable how few rights workers in the richest country in the world have, in comparison to other countries that have a much smaller GDP and people don't make as much money, but there's at least free healthcare, or even free education as well. But that's another discussion for another time. Anyway, so these union workers have had this nasty contract forced upon them. I mean, Biden has made it illegal for them to strike, but who knows? Maybe they will strike. Although I doubt it, because those unions aren't very radical. The union leadership has responded, saying basically, we're not going to forget who stood against us, and in the next elections, we're going to give our votes to the party that supports us, blah, blah, blah. So it's all really still, unfortunately, connected to electoral politics. It doesn't seem like there's going to be any serious strike action here after Biden signed that contract, which is a real shame, because if they had a strike, they would get a lot more than 14 sick days, I think. But anyway, let's go on to the second part of this live stream that I wanted to have. I wanted to go over the Communist Party USA's reaction to this. And the reason specifically I want to talk about the CPUSA is because of, the radical history it has in the United States. They're the Communist Party, they have the brand name Communist Party USA, and, they're supposed to be representing the workers. But as we know, the party line of the CPUSA leadership for a long time has basically been support the Democrats because the Republicans are fascists. And this has been really, pretty much no different. I don't want to put words in the mouths of the CPUSA leadership, but we're going to read the article that was written as like the official line of the CPUSA right now. I have it open here, and I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Just going to open it up for you guys. All right, now you should be able to see my screen. All right, this is Communist Party position. Oh, sorry, this is on the war in Ukraine. We're going to talk about that later. The right to strike can never be compromised. December 2nd. So this is very recent. This was yesterday. So it starts with, yes, a strike of railroad workers could bring the national economy to a halt, including stopping the flow of millions of dollars a day in profits for the railroad companies. Let's keep in mind that it's big business, not workers, that's crashed the nation's economy at least 3 times in recent memory. Okay, so far so good. That I completely agree with. Goes a little bit into historical other examples of basically big business ruining the economy, and putting it at the and fixing it basically at the expense of workers' checkbooks. It's all there. But then we get to this part where it's like, but, we said all this pro-worker stuff, but fascist danger, okay? So what kind of fascist danger could be here? Nevertheless, it's hard to discount concerns about the political ramifications of the economic disruption that would result from a rail strike in today's political scene, where fascism is a real threat. So, with the exception of where we're talking about fascism here, this is basically Biden's position. This is why this is what Biden said is the reason why he's forbidding workers from striking, because of the political ramifications of economic disruption and the economic ramifications. But this is what we have to grapple with here. The fact that the CPUSA says fascism is now embodied in the Republican Party, which represents the most extreme and dangerous elements of finance capital powered by racism, misogyny, transphobia, yada, 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 anti-Semitism. The capitalist forces in the array include oil and coal, blah, blah, blah. Basically, fascism is the Republican Party, MAGA, anything connected to Trump, and all that. So, basically, on an equal level, that the CPUSA is saying that the workers have a right to strike, they're saying there is an equal amount of threat of fascism becoming a problem if the strike was allowed to go through. And of course, in this article, there's no call to challenge this decision by Biden, to oppose this decision. It's basically saying it's basically just paying lip service to these workers, saying they have a right to strike, but we have to worry about fascism. But let's talk about this fascism in the Republican Party, because this is like, first of all, again, this is parroted from the Democratic Party. It's the Democrats that say that the Republican Party is fascist, they're extremists, they're terrorists. It's the Democratic Party that says that January 6th was was a terrorist attack or a coup d'etat. They have the FBI investigating people who stormed the Capitol building on January 6th. I mean, like, that to me is not a coup d'etat or a terrorist attack. That is like way overboard. A clear example of political opportunism by the Democratic Party. But the point is that this is a Democratic Party line, that the Republican Party is fascist. But the Republican Party, I mean, let's think about what political party is in power right now. It's the Democratic Party. And right now they're waging a war, a proxy war in Ukraine that could potentially lead to a third world war, which the last party that started a world war was Nazi Germany. Their bombastic imperialist their bombastic imperialist ambitions, were so big that they didn't care about the loss of life that would be incurred if they were to, invade Europe, invade Russia, invade the entire world to accomplish their goals and exterminate people. I mean, obviously the Democratic Party is not talking about exterminating entire peoples yet, but this proxy war is bringing the world to the brink of another world war, and it's being led by the Democratic Party, and whose family has business interests in Ukraine? It's Hunter Biden. It's the Biden family. The Democratic Party has been the party of war. Victoria Nuland, the Undersecretary Secretary of State, she's a liberal. She's a neocon. She's not a Republican, and she's been one of the main forces behind supporting the Euromaidan coup d'état back in 2014 and the Ukrainian government right now in its conflict against Russia, in the war that it started in late 2014 and early 2015 as well. So the Republican Party, on the other hand, of course, the Republican Party is obviously very anti-China. They probably, I don't know if they would mind an invasion or support for Taiwan, but that's actually not important right here. Also, because Nancy Pelosi is also the one that's been recently stoking the flames, the tensions over there in Taiwan because of her visit, who's another Democrat. So it's been the Democrats that have been participating in this imperialist circus all over the world, trying to antagonize mainly Russia, but also China. And it's actually been mainly Republicans, believe it or not, that have been the most critical of the United States blank check for Ukrainian forces in Ukraine right now in mainstream politics. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying the Republican Party is an anti-imperialist party. It's simply the fact that the Democratic Party is in power right now, and the Biden family has interests in Ukraine, and this whole Ukraine situation happened during the Biden presidency. That made it so that the Democratic Party was ready to defend those interests. And because of the fact that the Republican Party wants to take power, they want to take the contrarian position. And so because of that, they've taken an anti-war position with Ukraine. But it's purely for opportunistic reasons. We see the same thing in history with the Iraq War. It's just the script was flipped. It was the Republican Party in power waging war in Iraq, and the Democratic Party saying, peace, love, and everything else. But if anything looks like the face of fascism in the United States right now, it's the Democratic Party, which is conventionally considered left. It's the party that actually talks, gives this lip service to workers, but doesn't really do anything, and actually does do something. They enforce the boss's contracts on the workers while saying, oh, well, we're a union party. They pay lip service to, homosexuals, the LGBT community. They pull that line for their own political purposes. They talk about the rights of transgender people in the military. But at the same time, that rhetoric is just followed by imperialist war. So that is the real face of fascism. It's not the Republican Party calling for this kind of stuff. And even like if you want to make the argument that, you know, the Ku Klux Klan, for example, is on the right wing of the political spectrum. Well, the Republican Party doesn't approve of the Ku Klux Klan, you know, just like the Democratic Party doesn't approve of anything outside of its purview. It doesn't you know, approve of anything left of it, just as the Republican Party doesn't approve of things right of it. Like any socialists that tried to get into the Democratic Party and change it for the better were just sidelined, which should have been obvious from the beginning. But so this kind of argument that the Republican Party represents some sort of fascist force in the United States and that anything needs to be done to counteract it is a completely flawed analysis of the material conditions of the 21st century. It has led the Communist Party USA down a position that is not in defense of the working class. It's taken a dogmatic position in defense of one part of the bourgeois class, which is the Democratic Party, because it's failed to recognize that the you know, any sort of redeeming qualities that were in the Democratic Party back in the 1930s when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in power and you know, leading the United States in a war against Nazi Germany alongside of the Soviet Union. Any semblance of that is gone, and it's been long gone, even before the Democratic Party was like an anti-war party in Iraq. But now it should be even more obvious, and yet the CPUSA still dogmatically holds to the idea that because the Democratic Party is left, or conventionally understood to be on the left, then they're better than the Democratic Party and they should be supported, basically given a blank check. Although the CPUSA doesn't say that, that's what their actions are actually doing. And to bring the point home with that, I'm going to take a look here also at another article in connection to a stance that the CPUSA has taken in the past, and still has, specifically on Russia's military operation in Ukraine. So let's take a look. So here is an article from March 24th, and when you go to the CPUSA, you know, that's a long time ago, but the CPUSA's website, if you look up Russia in the search bar over here, it's one of the first articles to come up. So this line apparently has not changed. So it specifically addresses questions recently about the CPUSA's position on the war in Ukraine. So it has some comments from the party's leadership. So on March 3rd, it immediately starts with Russia's invasion of Ukraine was wrong and in violation of international law. In the words of the CPUSA's National Board, war between states is never an acceptable solution and must be rejected in the strongest terms. Okay, before we move on, I mean, that is like the most liberal statement I have ever read. War between states is never an acceptable solution. What about, okay, let's go back to the last article. What if there's a fascist country attacking other countries? Don't you think war would be an acceptable solution to that? I mean, it's like completely incoherent, the line of the CPUSA's leadership on this kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I am anti-war. Okay, I obviously I was against the U.S. invasion of Iraq. I do not like war either, but there are some wars that in which there are sides that are fighting in a justified manner. I mean, and this just even further goes to show the CPUSA's lack of understanding of even the historical context of the whole situation in Ukraine. Because, spoiler alert, in this article, there's not one mention of Donbass, okay? It's like they don't even know it exists, which is the main problem that most people in the West have because of the fact that the Western media has never showed that perspective. But because they don't even mention Donbass, they don't understand that the war in Ukraine started in 2015. It started when Ukraine launched its so-called anti-terrorist operation against Donbass, which simply declared its independence from Kiev. They didn't want to live under a fascist regime, an actual fascist regime. Not the Republican Party that the CPUSA and the Democrats claim is fascist, even though, you know, they're not going around heiling Hitler and like tattooing swastikas on themselves like some of the people in power in Ukraine are doing, actually a lot of them, and have been since 2014, 2015. So because they don't understand that actual fascists started that war in 2015, they come to this conclusion: war between states is never an acceptable solution and must be rejected in the strongest terms. When in reality, if you apply an actual dialectical materialist analysis on the situation, an anti-imperialist one, and you actually have done your homework on the historical context of all this, you would come to the conclusion that Russia launched its military operation to put an end to this war. That was the point of this military operation, to end the war. This war that was waged to establish a puppet state for NATO, for the United States, right on the border of Russia. As if there aren't enough of those already. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, Poland, and all the rest of the NATO states that are, you know, not exactly on the border of Russia, but still pose a military threat to it. And another thing that this proves is that the CPUSA did not even bother to either reach out to or understand the position of the Ukrainian or Russian communist parties. I don't even know. I'd be surprised if there was anyone in the Communist Party of the United States that even speaks Russian, because if there was, they would probably have some sort of idea of the position that these parties have taken. They would probably understand that the special military operation was by and large the result of pressure exerted by the Russian Communist Party on Putin's administration to finally take concrete steps to end the war in Ukraine, to launch this special military operation. I mean, we have to remember that the Russian Communist Party was the first political party in Russia and it was back in, I think, late 2021, if I'm not mistaken, to actually say, look, these Minsk agreements are not working. We need to make sure that we recognize the independence of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics, and that we actually do something concrete to help the people of these regions that have been bombed and tortured for the past 8 years by Ukrainian forces. And there's also, so that's the Russian position that obviously has not been taken into account by the American Communist Party. But then there's even the Ukrainian Communist Party, okay? We'll take it another step further. The Communist Party of the country that, according to Joe Sims and the CPUSA, was invaded by Russia, okay? So this is our website, TheRevolutionReport.com, and we actually published a speech that the Communist Party General Secretary of the Communist Party of Ukraine gave at an international meeting of communist and workers' parties in Cuba that took place in October of this year, all right? So just to give you an idea, a little idea of some of the, because it's a long speech, I'm not going to go through all of it, but just to give you some of the highlights and how blatantly it contradicts what the CPUSA is saying, we can look right here. I cordially welcome everybody, blah, 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 on behalf of the Communist Party of Ukraine, the party which has been illegally banned in my country, where our comrades and like-thinking people suffer political persecution, arrests, and physical violence on the part of the ruling neo-Nazi oligarchic regime, a regime which is, in essence, reactionary and fascist. Okay? So if there are any fascists that the CPUSA should be worried about, they're in Ukraine. And I also want to mention that the Ukrainian government did not just ban the Communist Party of Ukraine. They banned all opposition. Anyone, even pro-Russian opposition that is not necessarily communist. All communists and socialists in Ukraine, essentially all of them, or at least the vast majority of them, oppose the Ukrainian government, and they have been banned. They're not allowed to openly agitate or organize or anything like that. And, two high-profile organizers for the Leninist communist youth movement in Ukraine were arrested. And they're still in prison, as far as I understand. So, this is another reason why the Communist Party of Russia was so insistent on pushing for, some sort of action in Ukraine, because even before they were banned, they were fighting against the Kiev government itself as well. So, let's move on with this speech. The forces of international imperialism, the sharks of globalization in their struggle for redrawing the political map of the world, for resources and commodity markets, resort to any methods and in fact act as instigators of the Third World War. Exactly what I was saying before. The tragedy is that the reactionary forces make active use of neo-Nazism and neo-fascism to achieve their goals. Okay? And if I remember correctly, this is a long speech. I remember there was something about the actual military operation. I'm pretty sure it starts here. As this kind of echoes what I was saying before. The material basis for all this was the armed coup in 2014, the comprador bourgeoisie allied with neo-fascists and organized crime, which the West supported. So this is a clear example of Western aggression against Russia. The special military operation is not at all the beginning of this. It was through the fratricidal civil war, a war against the citizens of Donbass who are upholding their constitutional rights and freedoms. Okay? This is again, like I said before, this is the key moment. No mention of Donbass in the CPUSA's line, and one of the main things that the Ukrainian Communist Party General Secretary has to talk about here is Donbass, which, was the reason Russia launched the special military operation in the first place, to defend them. It was these forces which, at the instigation of the U.S. ruling circles, turned civil war in Donbass into a war against Russia. A war against Russia. And this is exactly why, these people, the Ukrainian communists, the Ukrainian socialists, they view the special military operation as not part of some imperialist war, but as a defense against imperialist aggression. What's going on right here is really a textbook example of not an imperialist war, but a patriotic war. And I've said several times in other videos about how the people of Donbass actually call this the Great Liberation War, which echoes what they call the Second World War, the Great Patriotic War. So coming back to this CPUSA article, this right here is complete nonsense. Let's go back. Let's go further into this article. The working class of both countries deserve support and solidarity. Yeah, sure, I agree with that. But how does that translate into action? That's the bigger question. They say that 1 million people signed a petition for peace in Russia recently. That's huge. Yeah, those are like liberals that they understand as much as the CPUSA understands about the Ukraine conflict. And they're chanting no to war because they don't understand that the war started before Russia's military operation. So because of the lack of historical context, the lack of understanding, the lack of an application of the dialectical method of understanding this situation, you get the CPUSA supporting liberals in Russia. They probably don't even know what forces, were behind these people that signed this petition. But then again, they're doing the same thing in the US with the Democratic Party, so let's move on. The main task has to be to work to develop a peace movement and change to the Biden administration's policy. Yeah, good luck with that. Especially as the Communist Party in the United States. You're not going to accomplish anything in Congress or trying to talk to the Biden administration. So the context set by U.S. imperialism's role over these past months cannot be ignored, including the Cold War rhetoric, saber-rattling, and what might be called a de facto NATOization of Ukraine. Yeah, that's true, exactly. But this is counteracted by the CPUSA's position that Russia has launched a hostile invasion of Ukraine, and because of that, the result that we get here is a position that's essentially like Trotskyist, like a position that makes no sense in the real world, but is ideologically pure. Yes, we oppose all military aggression. Well, that's completely undialectical. You know, in most wars, or at least in wars that are not imperialist wars, there are two sides, and one is an aggressor and one is defending itself with force. Should we criticize the side that's defending itself with force? Of course not. But still, we see Russia's invasion of Ukraine threatens catastrophic consequences, and just a position that doesn't make any sense. So basically, my point here is that this position of the CPUSA on the talks about strikes by railway workers in the United States is really nothing surprising, because this is kind of a tendency that's already been established by the CPUSA, taking these weird positions that are trying to be, you know, on both sides of the fence, playing the good guy, and end up just supporting liberals, you know. But yeah, so that's I just had to do a live stream about that because I've been following this railway dispute for a long time. I didn't expect Biden, to be honest, to outright outlaw an actual strike by the railway workers, but you know, the imperialists continue to surprise me with their ever-growing cruelty and brutality. Just when you think they can't go any farther, they do go farther. So yeah, and then I saw the CPUSA's position. I saw in a bunch of chats that the CPUSA was supporting Biden in making this strike illegal, and I had to make a live stream about it. So yeah, that's basically all I have to talk about with that. But I'd be happy, since we've only spent 40 minutes, so I'd be happy to check out some comments or questions you guys have in the chat right now, and I'll be happy to answer them. Go ahead, just write your questions or comments in the chat here. It could be about anything regarding the Ukraine conflict, or even, like, I don't know, life in Moscow. I live in Moscow right now, so any questions from the audience? Joe Sims is a Democrat with a small d. That's pretty funny. Yeah. I thought that I saw the fact that Haas completely crashed the CPUSA Zoom call that one time. That was hilarious, dude. I laughed. I watched that several times and laughed very hard. What do I think will be the next socialist nation? Maybe the United States. Elizabeth, this photo in my right corner, that's Alexander Zakharchenko. He was the first head of the Donetsk People's Republic when it was founded, and he's really loved by the Donetsk people. He was unfortunately killed by a bomb in his favorite morning breakfast cafe that he used to go to every day. It was in the center of the city, and he would go, you know, by himself and allow people to come up to him and talk to him and meet him and stuff. Completely, he was a real man of the people. Every time I go to Donetsk, you know, if you ask anyone in Donetsk about Alexander Zakharchenko, you'll most likely get a really positive reaction. He was really loved by the people there. What do I think about the Communist Party of Britain? To be honest, I don't really know that much about it. So I don't think I'd be able to say much about them, but I'm sure I like them more than the Tories. So. But yeah, that's Alexander Zakharchenko. And behind me, of course, is Lenin, the famous picture of Lenin there. There's also that. And another Soviet propaganda poster up here. I'm not sure you can read it, but it's one I find very inspiring. It says, "Чтобы больше иметь, надо больше производить. Чтобы больше производить, надо больше знать." It means to have more, you need to produce more, but to produce more, you need to know more. It's a very nice portrait or poster. Have I heard of Jen Zedong? You mean the Reddit page? I have heard about it, yeah. I'm not sure which one is which. Is it the anarchist one that makes fun of the Maoists, or the Maoist one? Because I was actually booted from the Maoist one, and the anarchists don't like me very much either. So these busts, this is Lenin, of course, over here. This is Marcus Aurelius, who is one of the big figures in the Stoic philosophy. I'm really into Stoicism, pretty much just as much as I am into communism. I think there are a lot of parallels, actually, between the writings of the Stoics and the party literature from the Bolshevik Party before the death of Stalin, basically. The attitude within the Communist Party was very Stoic. It had a lot of parallels with Stoic philosophy. What else here? Oh, and this is also Felix Dzerzhinsky, or Iron Felix. He was the head of the Cheka, which was basically the predecessor of the KGB in the Soviet Union, a Bolshevik revolutionary, and they called him Iron Felix because not only because he was, the head of the Cheka, or the predecessor to the KGB, but also because he had very firm principles. He was a very principled man, very straight-edged, and very dedicated to the communist cause. I think he was a real hero of the Communist Party. So. How about Workers' Party of Britain with George Galloway? I love George Galloway. So, as I understand, his party is a new one. So we're gonna have to see what happens with it. But if it's associated with George Galloway, I support it. What photo below the icon of the show? That's the one I was explaining, Richard. This is Alexander Zakharchenko, who was the first head of the Donetsk People's Republic, who was murdered by a Ukrainian bomb. But anyway, comrades, thanks for your questions. I think I'm going to end it here. So I'm going to try to do these live streams once a week, I think. I'm trying to put together a system so that we can get more content on the channel and grow the base a little bit faster. So I'm going to try to do a live stream every week alongside working on these other videos that take more effort and everything, and article writing as well. So keep an eye out for that. But it looks like I missed someone's question, so I definitely want to get that. The Russian language question. Yeah, how long did it take me to become proficient in Russian? How did I go about that? I studied Russian for 4 years in university in the United States. And then, so I had an understanding of the grammar and everything already, but I had very little practice because all of our professors were like defectors from Soviet Lithuania and Soviet Poland from the 1960s and 70s. They didn't even speak Russian in a way that Russians speak it anymore. So I didn't really have much practice. I've been here for 5 years now in Russia, so I've been speaking Russian, I guess you could say 9 years. And it took me, I think I really only became super comfortable and fluent last year. So, to give you an idea. But yeah, alright, so I'm going to end it here, comrades. Stay tuned for more. I'm going to try to have another live stream next week as well to keep up the output of content. And yeah, so keep an eye out for all that, and Workers of the World Unite.